from St. Mary's. He had resigned from the position of Grand Chief because he had focused his life around assisting our men coming out of the of the penitentiaries. So he had a place where they would go to, and he'd teach them a lot of the cultural teaching ceremonies and so forth. So he resigned as the Grand Chief, and then, as I said, the grandmothers went up and down the river to meet, and then eventually they brought forward 3 names, and out of those 3 names that they came to a consensus that I was the one that would like to see as being the Grand Chief. The rhyme and reason is because I knew the language, I knew ceremonies, and I was the past Grand Chief's sidekick, so to speak. I was his PR person, and I would arrange meetings for the Grand Council and so on and so forth. So, and plus, I was asked to carry the people's pipe at the, there was a holistic pipe presented to the Grand Council, and they asked me to carry the pipe. So I had the knowledge of doing the pipe ceremony and so on. So, and smoking the pipe for the people. And so, long story short, that's 4.5 years ago that happened, and I'm still Grand Chief until I guess I decide or the grandmothers decide to replace me. There's a 3-strike system. So anyway, if I get 3 strikes, if I don't fulfill my duties and they think that I deserve a strike, then they'll let me know. So far that I don't have a strike, so I'm still batting 1,000, so so to speak. It's been a trial and tribulation, really, being the Grand Chief. There's some times that I have to decide things that's not popular, so to speak, dealing with the communities and our rights, because the mandate of the traditional Grand Council is always to stand up and protect our lands, our waterways, and all the flora and fauna that's around us within our homeland. And sometimes, when there's like economic development proposals that come forward, and if it threatens our homelands and water and air, then we have to stand up against it. Even though at times our community leadership are for the economic development, we might be against it. So this is where it becomes really uncomfortable in standing up against something, and you have to go up against the band elected leadership sometimes. So this is where the job and the duties of the Grand Council and the Grand Chief gets really uncomfortable, because you have to go against your own people sometimes. And, we're not the opportunists. We're more there to protect our security for our lands and waterways and so on. So in saying that, I'm a father of 2 kids and 3 stepkids. 2 boys, 3 girls, and Joan and I share 10 grandsons, so we're quite busy at times. But today is our day off, so to speak, that we don't have kids today. So Thursdays are breathing day. So I teach once a week at the Chief Harold Sacker School. I go in on Wednesdays to teach about our culture, about our longhouse traditions, some language. And on Tuesdays, I go into the craft college here, and I help guide and direct the Indigenous students who are attending school there. So, and besides that, I write a lot of letters, a lot of support letters for people who ask for, support letter dealing with, protection lands and resource, our resources and so on. What else can I say? I just turned 60 this year, so I'm past that 50 stage of half of a what would you call it? But anyway,
Tuckamos?
yeah, Tuckamos, no man. So anyway, so I'm past that stage, and I'm the youngest of 10. I'm there. I have 4 brothers and 5 sisters. I'm the youngest, and fortunately, we grew up in a home that the language was spoken fluently. So I'm a fluent speaker and of the Wolastoqey language, and we all speak it. And it's really, I really miss my siblings, because we used to get together a lot, and then we can converse in our language, and we do that a lot on Zoom or on phone calls and stuff. So I'm fortunate that way that I can still speak my language. My mom was quite the avid speaker. My grandparents and all my relatives and so on. So this is pretty much who I am, and I'm very proud to be a citizen of our nation. And I look at our people belonging to a nation rather than just a community, because when you just look at yourself belonging to a community, you kind of limit yourself. And when we did sign those peace and friendship treaties back in 1725 and 26, we signed as a nation, not reserve or community. So I try to teach our people to think about us as a nation rather than just a community, because it limits us, and this gives the governments the opportunity to pick us off and divide and conquer methods that they do have when they trying to deal with community per community. And we'd be a lot stronger if we came up in a united front as a nation. And I try to encourage the Mi'kmaq people to do the same, and the Passamaquoddy and the Penobscot and the Abenaki to speak like a nation rather than just the communities. So I'm here to talk about food sovereignty, right, Mark?
Yep.
Yeah. So,
specifically, I guess the title. Let me look this up for the official wording. Our title is "The Impacts of Colonialization on Indigenous Food Systems," if you want to be very official. You can also talk about ways to decolonize those food systems, and efforts being made underway there. I was intending to kind of walk away, but so far I'm really kind of glued in my spot. I'll be honest. And Dallas earlier today was actually talking about the importance of Indigenous foodways to culture, and I'd love to let him get into that. But I'm going to take advantage and monopolize your time here while I'm here first. I wanted to ask you, you're talking about language, and I wanted to ask you, maybe this is a little bit kind of out there a little bit, but I was wondering if there's any connections between language and Indigenous foodways, and any, right now I know there's efforts underway to bring back language. Do you find any parallels between that and efforts to bring back Indigenous foodways?
For sure. My cousin Lisa Pearly Dutcher, she just graduated from the Wolastoq language program here in St. Mary's. Her and there's Louis was part of that too. You had Louis as a student last year, and there was, I think, 12 or 13 students. And what Lisa's plan is, along with Chquabin, Sapir, who's from our community too, Justine Trombley, my niece, Louis, and I don't know if Lisa is part of this, Louis' sister or not. But what they're planning on doing is starting up a pre-K immersion school, hopefully this fall. And part of this whole initiative in getting that school ready is it's going to be all land-based. Hence, saying that being land-based is that what they're looking for is a space in an area where they can utilize to go out and teach the kids about the trees, the foods, the wild plants that grow, and plus, the medicines and food that grow, like right now is fiddleheads. This is when our people would be going out and are going out to collect fiddleheads as one of their food. And so Lisa is going to start up this school for K4s and to have it in a immersion setting to teach about plants and food, and hopefully as the school does grow, that they can have their own place where they would grow foods and medicine for the kids to learn from. So this whole process of food sovereignty is focused on our young ones, and to teach them that to get away from the grocery store and the processed foods that we are kind of consuming, or the fast food places, where trying to get our people back into growing their own foods. And if you look at the mass population of North America, that the highest rates of heart disease, cancers, and diabetes lies within the indigenous communities and nations. And the rhyme and reason behind that is, I've heard, I had a chance to meet this wonderful young girl who I think recently, last year, graduated from the University of Hawaii, who was learning about indigenous food sovereignty. And part of her PhD degree and her thesis was focused on their food sovereignty. I believe she's from the southwest of the States, where she was studying on their food systems and how they can help their people lessening the high rates of diabetes, cancers, and obesity, and so on. So I think part of this whole process that Lisa wants to do is to reintroduce and reclaim our food, what we naturally grew here, corn, beans, squash, and the wild berries we picked, nuts, fiddleheads. Unfortunately, we were known as like salmon people, but Doreen's dad. I remember Doreen's dad going out fishing salmon when I was younger, and man, all the men would go out in our communities and go out in the evenings and go and cast their lines out in the Nagot, the Tobic River, to catch salmon, and we were known as the salmon people. That was our main source of food at one time, and around this time of year, within the next month or so, our people used to feast on fiddleheads and salmon. Those were our two main sources of food. And then these dams were built, and then the overfishing in the oceans of Chief Hugh Akaji always, we always have these really deep conversations about the conditions of our fish supply. And he said, yes, pollution and dams are a huge problem and a major problem dealing with our food sovereignty through fish. But he says it's overfishing. And he says, if you want to tackle something about food sovereignty, especially the salmon and pollock and the various fish that we eat, we need to control our waterways, because they are being consumed by too many boats and so on, and the abuse of fishing. So how do we reclaim that food sovereignty, especially with salmon? These dams, and I want to share this. I think I probably shared this with the students last year. I remember I was just a young boy, probably the age of 5, before I went to school. And my mom and I used to walk down the road to visit my grandparents. And I remember walking down, and it was this time of year, because my grandfather was getting his garden ready in the back. And he said, so my mom went in to visit my grandma, and I stayed out back with my grandfather. And he said, "What's quickwas?" He said, "Come here, son." So we walked to the edge of the riverbank, and his house was on the riverbank of the Tobic River. And then you can see the Wolastoq River close. So my grandfather's house was near the point of the two rivers. And he pointed across the river to where he said, that's where I used to pick all my medicine, across the river. And he said, and that's where, like wild nuts would grow, and berries. He says, and he said, during the time in the spring, you can hear the salmon coming upriver. He said, even before you heard them, seen them. He said they sounded like a freight train coming up the river. He says they would come up to spawn, and he said the river would be like vibrating, and you can see them. And he said there were so many salmon you can actually walk on their back across the river.
Mm-hmm.
He said, and his father would say, Najipan Balangos, go get us salmon, son, for our meal. He said he would walk down, and he didn't need a rod, he didn't need a net. He said there were so many salmon, he just grabbed one, and he would chuck it on the bank, and then he would, put it out of its misery, and then take it up, and they would have salmon for a meal. He says that's how many salmon. He says there were thousands and thousands. He said then they built those dams, he said. And so when they built the dams, they flooded the area where he used to pick his medicines. It's Doreen would know this spot. It's right across in back where Elisa and Steve's house is. That's where my grandfather's near Gary Sapier's house. And that there's the island that sits there, and that there's the land. He said that's where a lot of medicine used to grow. He says, and
Indian metals.
Yeah, and he said before the dam, he said you can walk across the river, because the river was so low at certain parts of the summer. You didn't need a canoe or nothing, and there was abundance of clams, abundance of eel, abundance of salmon and trout, and now it's just limited. It's just and throughout times, we have factories that's been up and down our river, McCain's that's been spraying and dumping their toxins into our beautiful and bountiful rivers, And also, the potato farmers who have been using these chemicals to kill the tops of their potatoes, so that seeps into our river systems. And there has been sewer lines right directly from homes dumping into our rivers. So all this
And logging.
abuse, huh?
Logging once upon a time, right? Logging used to happen.
Yeah.
That's just so detrimental to a river.
Yeah, like logging, they used to be, they used to, like not ship the logs, but they just put the logs in the river that they would flow down, to the mills, further down river, and then this would, contaminate the areas where we used to fish. So all this stuff, the industries and factories and so on, and farming, it's a wonder that we have the highest rate of cancers within up and down our river valleys. Yeah, they've always said this. There was a study several years ago about why does like Victoria County, Queens County, Kings County have high rates of cancers, and it's because of all the spraying of the factories and so on. Here and Cecilia Brooks done a study several years ago. I think Andrew Nicholas was one of her, the late Andy Nicholas from our community assisted her in doing this study, and they done a study on the Wolusto, our river, and then about the growth of places where our muskrat would grow, Gilhizabus. So I remember going to the cultural center to listen to the study, and according to Cecilia, that the Wolusto was one of the dirtiest rivers in Canada. And then I remember like Andy Nicholas saying that, he says, and they surveyed and watched the movement of the river. He said below 1 meter of the river was so stagnant, it didn't move because of the dams. Nothing moved below 1 meter of the surface of the river. He says it's a wonder that fish can live down there, because below that it's all sludge and toxic because of the sprays and the waste that's been dumped in Wolusto. And he said what needs to be done is those dams to be dismantled for the river to cleanse itself again. So I was thinking, geez, why do we need those dams? Because I think we kind of have used them for like 14% of our power. It's really low. So why? And plus, there's a few dams that sell to the United States. So why do we need that? We're not benefiting from those dams. And a couple years ago, when they were deciding what to do with the Mactaquac Dam, Jesse Sabatis, who's a counselor there, had wrote to me and said, "Ron, could you write a letter in support of dismantling the Mactaquac Dam?" I said, "Sure." So they had a community meeting there with the dam commission and the NB Power to decide exactly what they were going to do with the dam, and what was eventually decided, and it wasn't. They didn't take Kingsclear's views on what to do with it, because Kingsclear said, "Why don't you dismantle the dam?" But according to the government, that it would cost as much to dismantle it as to repair it. But and our rhyme and reason was so the salmon can come back, so the river can start cleaning itself again. So, but they denied our the application to dismantle it, and and they're spending like millions of dollars to repair that. And it's senseless because they said once they repaired it, it'll be good for another 10, 15 years. Well, in another 10, 15 years, they're going to have to spend another few million dollars in repairing that. And there's always seems to be an underlying rhyme and reason why government do things. And it's not so much for the benefit of the people or of the species that live in the river. It's for economics reasons, or they're doing somebody a big favor. You know, so this river, you know, as Cecilia said, is one of the highest polluted rivers in North America. I'm thinking, wow, it's because of the stagnant below the surface, and she said nothing moves, and I was in shock. And with the findings of our muskrat root, Gilwizwash we call it, she said she studied in Mi'kmaq, Wolastoq, and Passamaquoddy territories where our muskrat root is picked, which is a medicine. If you're not familiar with it, that our people have used since the beginning of time. Like we have stories about the medicine and how it came to our people. But my grandfather chewed that every day. It's I believe in the English language, it's called calamus root. And this root actually prevents colds and certain viruses to enter your body. And unfortunately, what Cecilia found was that in the various places she had tested the area and the land, is there's a very few places where the root is actually beneficial, because it says that the toxins that's around the area is usually around like farmland where like sprays have been put in the earth and it had poisoned the plant. So he said the risk really outweighs the benefit of the calamus root. So she kind of gave us spots, and she gave me that report years ago, but I couldn't find it. And she told us specific places where not to pick it. But and it was only like 3 places where we should pick it, and so you know we have to be aware of that. So, and on top of that, you know, the wild berries we pick, the wild nuts, you know, the present you know ways that they you know kill all the vegetation around these power lines or clear cuts. Again, we have to be very conscious of the spray of glyphosate, which is very, very cancerous. And I know Tobic, around the Tobic Dam, they had started to spray up there to kill vegetation and through the power lines too. And the Irving Company has been spraying, you know, in their clear cuts, this glyphosate, and I think they sprayed 3 times for it to kill all the vegetation. And what can only grow there is their is monoculture, which is a softwood that they grow for their own personal greed and gain. So again, when we try to reclaim or claim food sovereignty, these are the factors that we have to think about: is where is it actually safe to grow food, or to pick our medicines, or to pick our berries and wild nuts again, because we have to be really conscious of where this spray has been you know produced and put on the lands. So again, I you know, I've been talking to the grandmothers here, and they've been very, very concerned when we you know, like when we go out to pick our medicines, And I know Doreen does a lot of processing in medicines and stuff too. And we have to be very, very conscious of where we go and pick those things, because where has this spray, this very, very toxic poisonous spray have been distributed across our land. So yeah, Mark.
And glyphosate is just the newest herbicide and defoliant. From what I read here in New Brunswick, they were the first places to be experimenting with Agent Orange, like for Vietnam use back in the day. And that's another herbicide that they were using in this area that has a much even longer shelf life, and it exists in nature, which is crazy.
Yeah, I know, like in the areas up further up north and up near Tobic, that those potato farmers have been using this. I remember back between university and summer jobs, I was went out to help this farmer want to pick rocks and then get the field ready to plant potatoes. And that's a hard job, picking rocks from a field. And
oh yeah,
it's really hot. So anyway, he so I noticed one of the farm workers going down to this brook where our people would go and fish trout. And then he put this great big tube inside a brook, and it started to seep all this green stuff into the brook. And thinking, what the heck is that? So anyway, so I asked the people who were working with me, like, what's that? Is, oh, that's a chemical that kills what. I said, why is he putting it in the? He said, oh, he's just sucking up water. But when he sucked up the water, some had seeped into the brook. I'm thinking that brook flows down towards my community, which where a lot of our people would go and fish trout. I'm thinking, what the hell's going? This was back in 1981 or so. So this has been going on for, years and years and years. And unfortunately, that farmer who I worked for died of cancer. Like, he was full of cancer, and he would. And I remember him not wearing gloves, no masks or nothing. Like working with these chemicals, and I just scratched my head thinking, how come there's no stronger regulations against these? Because who controls the government is really corporations. They lobby, and they give a lot of favors, monies to help their candidacies during running elections and so on. So these corporations do this behind the scene, and we don't probably know 95% of what really happens behind those closed doors. When you have like companies and corporations who skip these strong in environmentally studies and regulations before these things are passed. So trying to gain food sovereignty is going to be quite a task within our own homeland, unless you have a land like up where you guys are. Like his farm, where it has not ever been sprayed with any toxins. And one of the scientists that I listened to, who described glyphosate, he said once that's sprayed, it takes decades for that to actually get out of the system. But if you're consistently spraying each year, then it's going to take 10 times as long for it to actually dissolve, or if it has a chance to dissolve. But trying to plant something there again, we don't know half of what's going on, or a lot more than half. So it will take us. I think like people like Cecilia Brooks and some of the grandmothers who know a little bit more about pieces of land where it has not been, abused through sprays or something to understand where we can actually start to plant our foods again to make to bring back food security. The Native women of Canada actually recently bought or are in the process of buying a piece of land out in Gagetown. It's an old farm, and it's gonna be a resiliency center for women. So part of their whole process there and their proposal is to go back to food sovereignty and plant their medicines there again. So I think they're going to have to probably get some samples of the land before they start doing that, to make sure that the land is very feasible to do that. Across the road, I think Garth and Edie live out towards Gagetown, and one of their friends had purchased the land across from the land where the resiliency center is going to be, and it's very clay, so it's really hard to grow stuff in clay. I think I'm just assuming that, but so I'm not sure what the land's like on the side of where the resiliency center is going to be, but I'm sure the Native Women's Association will be knocking on your door, Mark, and with the Hayes Farm in the future in getting your knowledge how to how to process and reintroduce our foods and our medicines back to the land there. So
You're on.
Can I pipe in on that one?
Yeah.
sure.
Claire's just been itching there.
Okay.
Yeah,
good.
the land that my mom and sister and I are stewarding in Gagetown is literally directly across the road from that spot. And of course, Edie is our next door neighbor. So we're super, super excited about that project. And they went to the planning review. I don't remember, PRAC, basically the zoning meeting was held last night, and it was unanimously accepted as it was by the Gagetown Council. So it's all signs are pointing to go, which is super, super exciting. And we ran into Alma Brooks down there last weekend, and my mom had a quick chat with her. So yeah, very excited, and it's so cool, and all the connections.
The new mayor, Derek Pledwell, is just amazing.
Good.
And
I don't know that person, but hopefully I'll be
he's the new mayor. I think the end of this month he'll be the new mayor, and he's just an amazing man. And he had I had mentioned to him, once the property is all processed, we need to have a great big gathering there and the feast, and to introduce ourselves, and just and he was like 100 plus for that center to be there. So, and
I'm pretty happy with my soil on that side of the road. So hopefully the soil on the river side is equally as good.
So is that clay there, Claire?
Nothing compared to what we're working with at Hayes Farm, that's for sure.
We are clay experts over here, no worries.
Yeah.
I mean, it could be, like the pockets of soil are pretty incredible how things can change from spot to place though. So it could be totally different across the road, but yeah, I'm pretty happy with what I work with down there.
Yeah. So I see Doreen's hands up. Do you have a question or a comment, Dor?
Yeah, I wanted to add to the when Mark said about our communities doing the bringing our food back. Okay, we have at our school and at Mossel's school, Mossel's is Fiddlehead and Melcy. They've been their own garden they have a greenhouse, and then they have a garden outside for about 6 to 7 years now, and they've been doing an awesome job with that, and all the kids are participating in that at the school. We also have our own community garden at our health center, which everybody's welcome to that. So then there's a grant going up for a third greenhouse and this year. So I don't know where that's going to be. Okay. On the fiddlehead thing, okay, I was in a program for about 3 years that was called On the Land Traditional Teaching Program. And I was the one taking that role on bringing back our medicines. So with the kids that participated in our program, we took them fiddlehead picking. I took them on the land and showed them the different types of plants that we used back in the day. So another thing is I worked with Woodstock First Nation, and I also took those kids on, and this is after the program was done. So, but in Woodstock First Nation, they're taking the young group right now, fiddlehead picking. So when the fiddleheads are going, all the youth is going out to pick fiddleheads. So we are, as different communities, reserves, we are teaching our kids how to pick fiddleheads or what to look for. And I also did at Mossel School, I also did nature walks with them. I would take them on herbal walks and show them what they can eat and what they can't eat. And we would make salves and we would make all kinds of stuff at the school. Another thing is fish and trout. When I was a little girl, we would only use a stick and a worm and a hook. And we would go up towards the dam, and all we would have to do is put the stick in the water and we'll get a trout. That's how much trout there was back in the day. We didn't need no fancy flies or anything like that. But now, lately, in the last few years, there's a blue algae that's happening in the St. John River. So, and that's been contaminating our fish, our trout, our fiddleheads. And I do not pick any of my medicines on the St. John River, none, because I know how polluted and dirty the St. John River is. And I know the process and the plants because they're root, right? So they're picking up all that toxins. So I do not pick any of my medicine on the St. John River. And then our dams, they were dumping Agent Orange above our dam, going towards our reserve, on our reserve land. When you're going up the hill, there's a road that goes there. But in the last few years, they were told to clean that up because Rayfield, he had a little camp up there and he was drinking the water, which he thought was spring water. And he started foaming at the mouth. So he went to the doctors, and that's how we found out there was Agent Orange there, because they did a lot of testing on him. So that's another thing I wanted to cover. And yeah, and the salmon was great. And I'll tell you a story. I grew up and we would have to take baths or showers at night because in the morning, our bathtub would be full of salmon. And back in the day, we would, the salmon will be as big as our bathtub. That's how big the salmon were. So, and then I would go with my dad and my sisters would too. I was the one that had the club and knocked out the salmon. Yeah, and then we would have burlap bags and we would have to lift the salmon and walk over the hill to our car and then take them home. So we like our family was like, we did fiddleheads, we did salmon. And then another thing is we went rabbit, we snared rabbit, my family snared rabbit. My dad was an avid hunter. He supplied our community with a lot of food. I remember as a child that people would come to my house and he would have boxes on the table with different people's names on it because different people had so many kids, right? So the more kids you had, the bigger box he would give them. And he never charged them at all, you know, and then he would supply that when we were kids. So, and then that's what our On the Land traditional program was too. We taught them how to hunt. We taught them how to fish, how to trap, how to gather. We took them hiking, and we did a lot of participation with our children. and told them a lot of our stories, because there's a lot of us elders that were there at the campfire, and we would tell them all the stories that we went through. Because with our language, a lot of our teachings come from stories. So so that's all I want to say. I talk fast.
Thanks, Doreen. I wanted to ask a question there, for both of you guys, if you can answer it. Is it true once upon a time humans used to just drink out of the river?
Yes.
Yeah.
Like that's hard to believe to me. Like
That's really hard. When we were kids, really young, I remember, well, not so much when I was a kid, but listening to stories from the old people that they used to just drink right from the river. I know the grandmothers that are part of the Grand Council, they said they can remember as little girls going with their parents, and they would have a little ladle as they're canoeing, and they would dip it in the river and just drink from the water. It was that clean. Even at our community, I remember as a child being out playing. There was natural springs all around Tobic. No matter where you went, there was a natural spring. And I remember up at Crow's Hill, we used to go sliding there or go play up there in the woods. There was a little roof of a structure that had a natural spring there, and there was always a metal ladle there. And then as kids would get thirsty, we just go dip, drink, and off we were again. And even walking through the woods, we'd see a natural spring, and we'd stop and drink from it. And we'd have we'd see like certain plants that grow like mint or even clovers and those white flowers. I'm not sure what those white flowers are called, but our grandparents always said you can eat those. And we'd be playing out in the woods, and we'd eat because we didn't want to go home. We wanted to stay in the woods and play. So we would eat those mint. We would eat a variety of plants that were actually good for you. And even back in 1975, I went with a science teacher at Monster School. Chris Bateson was his name. Pierre Perley and I, a good friend of mine who unfortunately passed a year ago or so, we went mountain climbing up to Mount Katahdin in Maine. And today, if you go there, they tell you never to drink from their brooks, even though they look very drinkable and fresh, because I think it's the sprays that they're spraying around. But back in 74, 75, when we went, we drank from those brooks going up Mount Katahdin. So they were so pure. But today, and it's very, even around Fredericton here, that there used to be like a lot of places you can drive out towards the country and out of the city limits and get spring water. But today, they caution you that you should get the water tested now. So again, here we are. I'm dealing with corporations who are spraying all around the lands here. Those poisons. Even there was a huge scare a couple years ago. I remember Elma Brooks saying that she got a notice in her mailbox to see if anybody had killed a moose, and to get the meat tested. Well, first of all, to get the liver tested, because the moose meat could be contaminated because of the glyphosate. And there was a few livers that came back positive with toxins, so they had to throw the meat away. So you have to be cautious, and where the deer and the moose eat around the area, because they eat the plants that's been sprayed. So yeah, so we have to be, again, it's we're in constant battle with corporations.
Right now with the glyphosate, We've been testing for 2 years now. I'm on that committee too. We've been testing, we tested the power lines. We have the blackberries, the blueberries and the raspberries there near Tommy Moulton's.
Yeah.
So we got all those berries tested for glyphosate or anything and any other chemicals. That came back good. There's none there. So now we're doing block D for we try to find blueberries there, but we could not find any blueberries, but we found the raspberries. So we took a sample of that. And now we're going to, I don't know if Jamie Otto did it yet, but we're supposed to be collecting fiddleheads. So I told him I won't be able to join him because I'm in this program. And then we have to get outer, like for the what the deer and the moose eat, their feed. But we are testing for chemicals in our areas. So just to let you know that.
So somebody has their head, Dallas, do you have your hand up or?
Yeah, I just kind of, I'm from Woodstock First Nation, just to introduce myself. I just wanted to add on to kind of point something out to Mark that he had mentioned earlier about the water being drinkable at one point. I think that, I'm not sure if he's aware, but I think people need to recognize that the displacement of communities has been affected a lot by like the accumulation of different forms of property, right? In particular, the dam in itself, like even where Woodstock First Nation is now, the original settlement was actually in Meductic, which is a few minutes down the road. And even now where our reserve is placed, the original reserve is actually below the water line where it is. So the river looked a lot different at one point in time than it does now. And you also have to take in consideration the amount of effects that have actually been on the ecology on the river, how the dam has actually affected certain types of different types of erosion that actually happen, like the natural erosion that happened before the dam specifically is a lot different than what it is now. So these are all things that you got to kind of have to consider when taking a look at something like food security within Indigenous communities, not having access to those original plots of land, we'll say, like to have access to your berries, have access to moose, or have access to, other types of wild game or herbs, medicines, things like that. The land looks a lot different than it did pre-contact as well, or prior to certain projects being done as well. So those are all like a lot of different layers of things that you need to consider when thinking about food sovereignty, like being able to actually identify certain areas where we should have our rights to be able to have access to those different ingredients.
Yes, exactly. And you're right, the erosion and people wonder why we have these floods each spring. Well, before those dams were built, there was very little flooding because the river just naturally flowed. Yes, there was always a little bit of flooding, but not as drastic as now. And then, you have the previous federal government, the conservative government that federally had released or deleted those protection areas around wetlands, around brooks and rivers that I think the previous Liberal government put in place to preserve and to protect lands. To protect the erosion and spraying and clear cutting. But when the conservative government came in back, I don't know how many years ago, maybe 10 years ago, that they lifted all those restrictions. And now I think this was kind of comical, there was only a section of the Wolastoq River that was protected. And the reason why that small section was protected is because there was prominent people who lived on the banks of those rivers, meaning, like either politicians or people with money. but how do you just protect a small portion of the river? The river flows. He can't say, well, I'm going to protect 3 miles of this river. Well, the river is always moving. It rises, it goes down. So it's kind of, again, the stupidity of humanity, thinking that you can section off a river and say just that portion is protected. Well, when once you're poisoned, it's like your bloodstream. Once you're poisoned in your blood, you have if you have a cold or something. Well, you just don't have a cold in part of your body. The blood flows for your whole body, so your whole immune system is at risk. So people are stupid, I guess. Bottom line, they're stupid, and thinking that preserving little spots of the river can actually make a huge difference. And they claim, they'll claim, oh, look at what we're doing. We're preserving this, we're preserving that. Where in the majority cases is that it makes very little difference. Like, I'm in favor of them banning plastic bags or straws and stuff, but that's just a small thing compared to the huge, that's a smoke and mirror, really, to the large factors that are really damaging and hurting the environment and Mother Earth and so on. So that's just a little checkbox that they're checking off. See, we're contributing to stop global warming and climate change and so forth. But it's
to add to that, and you said you could drink out of the water. In Burn Church at one point, my grandmother and my dad used to say that there wasn't even like starfish in the water, but after like a high amount of like boats traveling in and out, sort of damaged a lot of the sea life, which is kind of interesting to think about. And I don't understand why the wharf was like directly put like in Burn Church. I mean, I understand we have one; it's good to have one, but just the effects of the environment around it.
Even like the Tobic River, as a child growing up through my teens, we used to go up swimming at the pit, we called it, or the beach. I remember my friends and I would actually collect white stones and throw them into the river and dive down and retrieve the little white stone. Like today, I went up there a couple of years ago to be part of a ceremony up at in Tobic at the riverbank, and I stepped in the water and I walked in, above my knees, and I could barely see my feet. So even just from my childhood to the present time, is that how come our river got so filthy and dirty? Well, you look across the river, see these great big huge homes of these doctors and dentists and lawyers, and they have like boats and they have their sewer systems dumping their crap into the river. So, and because of their weight of their wealth, they can avoid any environmental sanctions on what they're doing, so on. So again, the stupidity of man. So
environmental racism is a real thing, huh?
Exactly. You've hit the nail on the head right there. And unfortunately here in New Brunswick, and I've claimed this for many years, is that we're a corporate captured province. And I've had people, I spoke to people that have moved here from all parts of Canada, United States, or the world, and they says that they cannot comprehend how one company or a couple companies can rule the province. And for the longest time, people fear to use the I name, the Irving name, and because, oh my God, I can't say the Irvings because my son works at their convenience store, or somehow somebody through their family was connected through their through their companies. And I done some digging a few years ago, I think 3 years ago, and back then the Irvings owned over 300 companies in New Brunswick. They might not put their name on their company, but they used another name for decoy and for taxation purposes.
It's wild to think about the connection between Irving and Beaverbrook here, huh? Like, and how he owned a lot of the Irving sort of accumulated a lot of the newspapers in this area, and he basically said, no, you can't print any article bad about Irving.
Oh yeah, I've tried to write stuff and send it to them. They just send it right back and say, nah, do it. So anyway, and then we have like a present premier, who is who worked for the Irving for over 25 years through the fossil fuel, industry and stuff. And you wondered, and I was talking to my neighbor here down the road who really had like researched a lot of stuff. He says the majority of the heads of either heads of companies through that deals through the province are like the Irving, like Irving workers. So these people who create policies used to work for the Irvings. So this is why that they can do what they do. And it's a really sad, we're in a really sad situation here. And
is there any oversight for that type of stuff? Like, is there people looking and being like, wait, this is a conflict of interest? Or is it just the government sort of being like, well, I mean, I don't get it. I just don't see how that's legal.
Well, I read the book from Jacques Poitreau, Irving versus Irving. He wrote this a couple of years, or maybe 5-6 years ago now, and it clearly defines how they slowly monopolized the province, and they became kind of the godfather of this province. And they actually, it's like a mafia. It is scary. When I went to Tualsi Bukdug back in 2017 to help them protect the land from fracking, I was arrested. And when I got back home, and that fall, I had to go back to work, and remember each morning as I left, there was a white van parked in front of my house for over 2 weeks. And then I would call home and ask my wife, I said, is that van still there? I said, well, it left probably a minute after you left. So come to find out, we figured that was the Irving security, because the Irving was in charge of the security up when the Elfie Bukdug crisis was against fracking was. So the Irving parked the guy in front of my house to watch me, and this is that mafia mentality. And this is really scary shit, really. That they have that much control. And then when I'd leave here and go back up to Elsie Bukdug on Sundays to go and help them protect their lands, there was always an RCMP that would follow me right from around Minto all the way out to where I was going. Always them following me. So again, we have even the police and the security and all of them who are protecting the rights of corporations rather than the rights of people and the land. So
I was also wondering, I wonder if there's like a direct number, basically when they're spraying over the forest. I wonder if there's like a distance, like if there's a set number from the distance of where they sprayed from that area. Like, I wonder what distance is like not affected by the spray that they're putting in the forest.
I'm not sure. I think the regulations is that they can't spray if it's a windy day. I think there's a set, a very, very weak regulation is that they can't spray if it's windy out, and they have to put out notices to communities if they're spraying. They have to pass out that they'll be spraying within certain spots. And you can, if you have land that is next to like a power line, you can actually write in a letter to environment, Brunswick, and say that we don't want that sprayed in our backyard. So they will not spray near your land. So, but
I wonder if we,
Irving, though, I'm not sure what their regulations. They don't have no. They don't have.
I wonder if we illegally changed our last names to Irving, if they take us more serious.
Yeah. Don't drink the Kool-Aid.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I know
Ron.
we're little sidetracked from our original, but we are talking about sovereignty, and these are the things that we're always behind the 8 ball, so to speak. We're always climbing these huge mountains. And then once we get to a certain plateau, there's another mountain to climb. It's just like, as sitting as the Grand Chief, it's like one thing after another that we're dealing with. It's just nonstop. It gets tiresome of having to challenge the government, whether it be federal or provincial or even municipal governments, about certain things that we're always questioning about, environmental regulations and so on. Are they fulfilling it? And a lot of cases that they'll just send me a letter back saying, "Oh, we'll look into these things." It's just like a formal letter that of response. So in relation to food sovereignty, we really have to seek and search out lands where we can actually get tested. And if we do want to reclaim our food sovereignty, and another thing that we have to look into, because water helps our food grow. I know like natural rain does, but still, we do still need water. So we have to put some a claim on sovereignty for water too. When I was, this was 3 years ago, when I went to the United Nations in New York City in the Indigenous Permanent Forum, I had the pleasure of listening to Evo Morales from Bolivia. And he actually, that's when he was president, and they actually put forward a claim that in his country, that Mother Earth has a right. So that the land that in which his people and his citizens lived on, and the earth and the water, that it had a right. And that's when he was being threatened by all these mining companies, and I think it was a uranium that's very rich in Bolivia, and this company wanted to come and to exploit uranium for batteries and so on. I think it was uranium, but that's when him and his people, his council put forward that Mother Earth in his country has a right. So anyway, I think this is the vision that we have to go forward to. But again, as I said, we are in a corporate captured province, and we are in a police state. Unfortunately, the police look at the murdered, missing Indigenous women and people within our own, communities. Be it, Chantal Moore or Rodney Levi. We're still struggling here, man, to even protect our lives, let alone the earth. So these are the hurdles that we have to try to get through. It's always constant, and it's always in a battle. And And I had the great opportunity to listen to the late great William Commanda from Maniwaki. Back in the early 90s, he came here when I was in university at UNB, and he brought this enormous wampum belt. It was huge. It pretty much was, I'd swear it was around 25 feet long by a foot wide, and wampum and the wampum beads were pretty tiny. It was just amazing how this belt was weaved, and that belt was passed down from his grandfather to him, and they called it the prophecy belt. And then for that evening when he spoke, he started at the beginning of the belt with our beautiful creation story, and then as he went along, he told our stories about humanity, about our people living here in this, yes, we warred, we weren't always peaceful people, but we came to the understanding through the grace of our grandmothers and the clan mothers that it wasn't wise killing and going to war, because their sons, their grandsons, their partners were being killed through war. So they created this great law of peace amongst the Wabanagi and the Iroquois Confederacy eventually. And then through, as he was sharing the stories of that prophecy belt, he came to a section where there was a crossroads, and I remember him distinctly. I can hear his voice just as clearer today as I did back in then. He said, he said, humans will come to this crossroads in life. He says, this is when we have to decide which road we're going to take. Are we going to take the easy road, like the nice paved road, the clear road, or are we going to take this really rugged path where we have to work hard to save Mother Earth and save all creation for the betterment of our kids and our great grandchildren? He says, so this is, he said, once we cross that crossroad and we decide which path we're going to take, if we take the road to destruction, then humanity will never survive. But if we take the road, the road less traveled, which is the more rugged road, is that there will be a time when our great grandchildren will refurbish the land and our food and our waters. But he said we have to decide this, and he said, and this time is near. He said, I'll be past, and he said, and I because I remember sitting right in the front row, and he pointed at me. He said, young man, which I was young back then, I was in my young 30s, said, you will see this in your lifetime. He says, but you'll have to go through some very difficult times, and you'll have to stand up, and you will be persecuted for your stance. And he said, but as humans, we have to decide, he said. And I remember him saying, currency, what we know today as money and stocks and bonds will falter. He says, money will mean nothing. He says, who the wealthy will be is the ones who can live off the land. They'll be the rich people, because everyone will be going to them and say, because currency and this Western civilized mentality will falter.
You know what's interesting about that is if people reacted as like, it was a scary concept when COVID first started, when people were reacting the way they did over toilet paper. And I was thinking, imagine if that was water, how they would react. That's scary.
Yeah.
That's
and
like,
yeah, and the funny, I have another funny story. Back in the 80s, I think it was the early 80s. I remember sitting with my grandfather. I always went to visit him daily, And I said, Moose, I said, what's the story for today? You know, I always ask him, because he always had stories for me. He said, you know, there'll be a day that you're going to have to buy water. And I thought that was the funniest thing that I've ever heard. I said, oh, I said, come on, Gil. I said, you're going crazy, I said. And then I remember, I think it was mid to late 80s. I was playing baseball in the local town of Perth. And I remember stopping into a place called Maritime Products. It was an old store there, that convenience store. I remember going to the back of where the coolers were, and I went to go buy a Coke. And lo and behold, there was bottled water. So I grabbed one and I bought it. And I went right up to my grandfather. And he was in his 90s then. And I go, plop. I says, there you go. He said, what did I tell you?
Gas is more cheaper than water nowadays.
Yeah.
That's wild.
A gallon of water costs more than a gallon of gas.
That's crazy. I think Indigenous people should start jumping on creating fresh water. Like we should start figuring out ways to store it just in case. I think every community should look into it.
Well, I think, Mark, you had mentioned to me when we had a conversation about copper and the medicinal value of copper, and if we can store like water in huge vats of copper, and copper has this chemistry that keeps water really pure.
Yeah, I don't understand the science, but it is antibacterial and antimicrobial. Apparently, the story I've read is the Egyptians, brilliant, used to use copper for their doorknobs to get into places, and that way you wouldn't transfer, germs and stuff on doorknobs, which is brilliant.
Wow,
that's cool. That's really cool.
And I know I've been in ceremony in the last 20 years or so with who they call themselves the Meday Society, which is in our language, Medevallans. And the women all carry copper cups. And when we do ceremony, when they pass around the water, they always use copper. She says copper is a purifier, and it keeps the water pure, and there's some spiritual chemical connection to copper. And I listened to this man, he was from out west the other night on it was called Indigenous, the significance of Indigenous spirituality. And he's a PhD Cree man. And he talked about how significant our spiritual connection is to every living thing, the food, the medicines, and how our people always knew. And it's in our DNA. It's in this what is called epigenetics that we know. It's so deeply rooted in our DNA, how we just know how we're connected to every living thing here on earth. And that's why we still have this sort of connection to food sovereignty, water sovereignty, how to treat the land, how to treat the animal world, and so on. He said, and he's this PhD guy. So he said, because a lot of times, like, science tries to prove that there's no such thing as spirituality, but like Western science is finally catching up in saying that that water has memory. Water has a spiritual memory. Trees have memory. Food has, and the communications. And I remember reading this piece years ago, or a few years ago, when one species of tree starts to create this disease, is that it talks to the other neighboring trees to let them know, to protect themselves, somehow to guard themselves from this disease. And again, I remember sitting in a sweat lodge between rounds, and I was with this an elder, and he looked at me, says, Ronnie, I said, what? He says, do you know there's more life below our feet than there is above our feet? It's all because we can see it. We don't really think about that. But what sustains us up here daily is because of what's below our feet. That's what sustains us.
And that is what regenerative farming is all about. We always talk about the micro and macroorganisms in the soil, and that is absolutely what sustains us. That's what feeds the plants, that feeds the animals, that feeds the humans, or all of those kind of things.
Yeah. So what he taught me too, as we were sitting there between the rounds in the sweat lodge, he said, Ronnie, when you plant your feet on the floor, when you get up in the morning, when you do your morning gratitude prayer to all of life, he says, start from the center of the earth, that core where that lava is, because that's what heats and produces this life right from the core of Mother Earth to all the various layers of shale, of earth, of the aquifers. The most purest water is below our feet. He says, those things we always forget because we don't see them, but those are the most important things we have to be thankful for. And all the insects that keeps us alive, of what they're doing below our feet, that keeps the good earth pure, and that grows our food and our medicines. He says, and talk to them. Don't because people might think you're crazy when you talk to trees or an animal or even talk to the wind. He says, but it's because of all of that why we're here, why we're still here. So, and he said, modern science, Western science is finally catching up to why we do these things, and we have a relationship. And again, as a kid, I used to catch my grandfather talking to groundhogs. I'm thinking, yeah, is he crazy talking to groundhogs? But he had a relationship with groundhogs, because never knowing this till later on, my grandfather's birthday is February 2nd, Groundhog's Day. So he always had groundhogs living underneath his old garage. So this is all I don't know, I guess the settlers, the English language is like holistic thinking. But really, as I was talking to my good friend Sherry Mitchell, who's a lawyer, and she's quite an advocate for spiritual rights there in the States. She's a part Penobscot and Passamaquoddy. She said, how would you describe this, Ronnie, this whole about life? She said, I said, Skijinawi, Pamauswagan. It's a way of life that we should be living, and the word Pamauswagan is life in our language, but it means more than that. Bum is the prefix meaning always in constant moving forward. And Pamauswagan is it's moving forward in a good way of living. It's really hard to explain, but that's what pretty much Pamauswagan means. And Skijinawi, I thought Skijin always meant native person, but what Skijin means is a person who dwells on the earth, and Skiju in our language means on the surface. So Skijin means a person who is connected to the surface of the earth. So that's what Skijin really means. It doesn't just mean a native person. What it meant back in the day, because there was, before contact, we considered all the people who lived here pre-contact as Skijinawak, people who were connected to the earth, because we all lived from the earth and with the earth. So, and we learn from the earth. And even in our creation story, oh, go ahead, sorry.
I'm just wondering what language is that? Is it Mi'kmaq or is that would be Maliseet, Skeetan?
Yeah. Wolastoq, yeah.
Well, let's take a, okay.
So anyway, I'm because I do have a lot of Mi'kmaq friends, and they have similar terminologies to describe that too. They said, yes, you're right. I'm real good friends with Serena Francis from the Big Cove, and she's very supportive of the way we think too. We think the same and so on.
Oh yeah, we're all in this together.
Yeah, distinct, defining our language and stuff. So that really describes, Skidgenui Babausawagan really describes our responsibility. And this is what humanity has really detached ourselves from. Why we call ourselves Wolastoq Gewig. We're not Maliseets. Our Mi'kmaq sisters and brothers gave us that name, Malazit, meaning slow speakers, but we have our, the name for ourselves, Wolastoq Gewig, which means people of the beautiful and bountiful river. So
and you guys would have, I think you guys would have called us porcupine people.
Yeah.
Yeah,
because you guys use a lot of porcupine in your
quills.
Decorative baskets and things that you guys made. But for us, that word Wolastoq Gewig means we are the people of the beautiful and bountiful river. So that clearly defines what our responsibility is to that river. And Stevie Bear, back in the day, it was like after Gwen, his sister, had passed away. I remember going up and taking part in doing the death ceremony for Gwen Bear, and she was my teacher, and she had pushed me out to many fasts. And I remember sitting with Stevie after our ceremony, and I remember Stevie looking at me. He said, "You know what, Ronnie? The last time I heard real laughter in our community, in the Wolastoq communities, is that before these dams were built. Because these dams, it's created a coronary attack to each one of our communities, because when you cut off the main artery of the system that keeps us alive, it's actually putting so much stress and pressure on our connection from community to community to community." He said, "I never heard real laughter since then." And I said, wow, what a powerful statement. And if you look at why human beings get a coronary attack, is because there's blockages within their systems going to their main source of life, which is their heart. And this is the artery of Wolastoq has been blocked off, and our people are suffering from that. As I said from the beginning, salmon was our main source of food, and fiddleheads, and everything that grow within and on the banks or around the river. That's why we live a very healthy and wealthy life. And today, and same in our Mi'kmaq sisters and brothers in the North Shore, the threat of salmon. But I watched this wonderful program about Listugush in having their own fisheries agreement within their own community, and still, have the ability to catch salmon and so on. And they regulate themselves. They don't have to listen to the government or DFO telling them how to regulate their own systems. That we have that knowledge.
I wonder, like, what happened with Burn Church? Like, what did we do that caused the fishing dispute, I guess, and that sort of thing? Did we try to regulate our own fisheries, or I don't remember what the story is?
Well, according to Mi'kmaq, a good friend of mine, she said because she was a part of that, and her brothers, is that they put forward their own regulations, And what happened is that DFO and the government, the federal government,
They're
actually,
trying to, weren't they trying to do backdoor deals with our chief, ex-chief?
that's what they did. They
Yeah, because I remember
actually,
my grandfather was in council at the time, and he said there was like random faxes coming in, and there was like, what kind of deals are these? He didn't know what the hell was going on. That's wild anyway.
Yeah.
Sorry to go off topic.
no, but that's, you are correct, is that what the DFO and the government are famous for is they divide and they conquer. So they went to each individual chief and they made side deals with them, and they made them sign these fishing agreements. You know, for instance, I know some people get probably pissed off at me. You know, we up Tobic, we never fish the ocean. You know, we were salmon people. We never caught lobster, we never caught crab, we never caught scallops or shrimp. We were salmon people, but because of the salmon or the fishery agreement, is that, you know, that they got these huge boats and they told them to go out and catch crab and scallops and lobster. We were never salmon, scallop, or lobster people. We were salmon. You know, the deal should have been, well, take these damn dams down and bring back the salmon. No, that should be being a part of the discussion, not giving us a deal. And back then, I don't want to say people's names, but the ex-chief back then signed a behind the door agreement with DFO, and then all of a sudden we got, I think Toby got $13 million in the course of 7 years or something like that, and without having to justify where the money's gone. And you know, you give somebody a huge lumps of money and tell them you have to justify for it. Well, you're like open for corruption then, unfortunately.
Hey, Ron, can I ask you about caribou? It was you that pointed out that caribou used to come through this area, and I had no idea. And how important was that to food systems in this area?
Yeah, well, my grandfather said he used to hunt caribou. So my grandfather lived to be 96, and he died in the late 1987. So he was born in 1895, around there. So, and he remembers caribou as a young man and hunting it. And I'm not sure what really, if it was climate change that moved them further north from here. And in fact, caribou was just as much a food food source for our people as moose was. So yeah, and I'm not sure if it was over like hunting by the settlers when they came here, but we had moose too. There's in fact, I have a picture here somewhere of my great uncle. His last name is Tremble. I can't remember his first name, but he was actually have a picture of him skinning a caribou. So yes, there was, and I'm not sure if there was ever a study on what happened to the caribou.
I think that it was a combination of changing climate and white-tailed deer moving north and taking the caribou's, territory.
Okay.
We wouldn't have ever had white-tailed deer here before.
And in our language, Magalib is caribou. So if we do have a word for it, and what I know that taught by the elders, to me, they said, if we have it in our language, we had it here. So it said, and all the answers lies within our language. And through this whole food sovereignty too, I think that's what what Lisa's trying to do is to recapture and reclaim food sovereignty through our language by producing, fluent speakers, hopefully from pre-K to eventually to help that school grow to hopefully up as far as grade 12. I know when
I want to talk about the food sovereignty. Okay, there's 6 of us that's being funded through Hayes Farm, okay? And this is our goal through 3 Nations, is to bring that food, bring our learnings from Hayes Farm to our community. So me and Ursula Bear are going to come back in November, and we're going to go into the schools and the community and teach what we learned here. But with Shane Dutcher, your cousin, he wants to build a farm on Tobic, okay? So we could supply vegetables to our community, which we already have in place right now as a vegetable. Every month, they distribute vegetables to our community. So with that, that's what we are here for. We're here for our community. So, and that's through 3 Nations. So, and everybody's supposed to be that, whoever was in this program is to go back and do your farm, but I don't know what their deal is, but I know this is my deal. But this is the only reason I came down here, is to provide for my community and to bring the teachings back to my community.
Good.
And that's what's food sovereignty. So we're preparing, like Tobic's on a good wavelength right now. And I'm proud of Tobic. I'm proud of my community for bringing all these different programs into our community.
Mhm.
So I just want to let you know where Tobic stands right now and what we're planning on. That's one of the things we're planning on doing.
I think Burn Church is doing the same thing. I think I'm going back to teach youth about all the stuff too as well.
Good. But wouldn't it be great? That's a great thing that Tobic's doing, the Gutgog, and different communities. But wouldn't it be great is as nations if we could to capture our crown land back and then have our own huge place where we can grow food and then use it as an economic base where we can sell at farmers markets and so on to generate funding.
That would be awesome.
That would be really cool.
And this way we can actually have food sovereignty and the economic development, and we can hire people to do this and train our young people about what food sovereignty is, living back on the land. That's the missing link, the huge. And I read the book from Art Manuel, a good friend of mine who again unfortunately passed away. He's from British Columbia, and in his book on Unsettling Canada, he says it's always been about the land, always dealing with Indigenous people. He says that 0.2% of the total land mass of Canada is only occupied by Indigenous people, where 99.8% is occupied by settlers population. So again, like no wonder we're in a state that we are when we don't have land. It's always been about the land. So if we can go back and utilize this so-called crown land and develop our own resources, like we can select, cut, and have our own wood lots to provide wood to build homes for our own communities. We can have food sovereignty. We can secure rivers and brooks and waters and give them protection. Like we do have that capability. We do have that, and we have enough people out there who has both the Western knowledge, meaning that they've gone to universities or colleges to learn these things, and we have people who still has our traditional wisdom and knowledge about how to maintain our food sovereignty and water sovereignty. So, we can do this, but it's because of, as I said at the beginning, we have a corporate captured province that the Irvings rule this roost. They're the cock of the walk here in this province. So how in the hell do we dismantle that? And I just been telling our people, you know what? Let's go back out to this crown land. Let them take us to court. Let's start building on that land. Let's start developing our own food sovereignty out there before they ruin all the forest. Let's go out, because the government's always threatening, oh, take us to court, take us to court. Well, we don't have the resource to take them to court. We don't have the millions of dollars or the time to take them to court. So I've been saying to our people, all the Mi'kmaq, the Wolastoq, and the Passamaquoddy, let's just go back out and take back our land, build homes, build communities out there.
Especially considering it's unceded, unsurrendered territory. Makes a lot of sense to me, Ron. I'm with you on that one.
Exactly. And having neighbors who want the same thing. These poor woodcutters who are throughout. I've met with these woodcutters who own their own machinery, who do select cut. They don't go out and clear cut. They've been squashed by the monopoly of the Irvings, and they can't sell their wood to nobody because the Irvings pretty much own all the mills around here in New Brunswick, and they have a stipulation that they can't sell outside the province.
Here's another conspiracy too. Right now, lumber prices are going through the roof, right? Yeah. Irving company, like you were saying, owns a lot of other companies, and right now the prices that the woodlot owners are getting for their wood is remaining low, even though the price of lumber has tripled at the point of purchase. Yeah. Irving's owns all of those other chains along the way, so they're still getting that high lumber prices, but the small scale woodlot owners are still getting low prices, even though the lumber's being sold for so expensive.
Yeah. I don't know if you ever traveled up towards Saint Leonard. The Irving has a mill up there, and off the 4-lane, there is so much lumber that's been processed and cut, and a huge clump of logs that have been cut, and that's been sitting there for years. And I've heard this through the grapevine, is they have an office in the States, I think in Boston or somewhere, the Irving do. And what they do is they'll buy their own lumber, build themselves, and never ship the lumber. So the profit stays within their own little system. And I don't know if you all know this, but the Irvings pay next to nothing in taxes here in New Brunswick. They have an offshore bank account in the Bahamas, and a good friend of mine who lives in St. John done research, and the Tim Hortons that sits across the road from the oil refinery pays more taxes than that refinery. Like, put your mind around that. A little Tim Hortons, which probably is an acre, pays more land tax than the refinery across the road, which takes up, I don't know, a huge amount of land.
Would you say that in the eyes of capitalism, Indigenous food sovereignty is facing issues as far as getting land? Would that be the biggest thing that we're facing? Would be land-based stuff?
I think land, yes, and pure land.
Pure land?
If it has not been processed through or contaminated through spraying or of glyphosate or whatever. And yeah.
And another thing too, I want to elaborate on the idea of one centralized farm thing idea. Right now, for the starting, we could basically maybe considering we're generating a network now, we could probably start it off. Some farms specifically grow specific things in our communities, and we just basically like network. So we'll transfer sort of produce from reserve to reserve. That will work.
Oh yes, the old bartering system, eh? That's in our blood.
Yeah, so I think that would be like the most effective way of like transferring, because on some lands we might not be able to get certain sort of vegetation, whereas other places might. So it'd be cool to sort of transfer some produce to each other.
And Emilio, I'll take that one step further. I used to manage a group of growers out in the Kawartha Lakes, and these group of growers are all relatively close to each other, but every farm grows something has a little bit soil difference, a little bit prevailing wind difference, a little bit of aspect difference with the sun. And every farm is going to specialize. I wouldn't say specialize, but every farm is going to grow something a little bit better than the other farm, just due to all these different factors. And so focus on what does best for you, as opposed to growing a little bit of everything. And if these different farms in different areas all grow something a little bit better than each other, then yeah, switch that in between everybody and you got something.
Yes,
Very cool.
I remember reading this book. And I was watching a documentary 2 years ago. It was called Indigenous something. Anyway, it was the very first produced. It was like a 4 or 5 night series on PBS back in the 80s, or no, sorry, late 90s, and there was, I'm not sure what the nation is down near St. Louis, Missouri, but they were eventually migrating southwest, and they came to settle at where it's now called St. Louis. And just outside the city of St. Louis is this huge pyramid. And for the longest time, the people doing research in that area thought that there were Egyptians there, because it was a huge pyramid. And come to find out, it was the indigenous people who settled there. And they created this great big mound. And what they did is they mastered agriculture, is that they would grow certain foods on the pyramid levels. And it was kind of like a loop, it looped to the top. And they would plant certain foods at the different levels, the altitudes, to find out what best grew at what level. But and come to find out, that was the central part of many indigenous nations from both Canada and the United States would gather there each summer, and this brilliant nation would pass out these seeds to these nations coming from either north, east, south, or west, and said, because of the climate of where your nation lives, this would best grow where you live. And I thought that was friggin' brilliant. And they actually had a water system that would keep flowing through that huge pyramid to keep the plants fed through water. And I thought that was brilliant. And they called us like savages and stupid, but those are really brilliant people there. And these were like visionaries. We had visionaries that knew these things. And I said, through our language, we know how we're connected to the land, to the plants, and through all of creation, the flora and fauna. So why wouldn't our people dream these things up or have visions how to maintain our connection to the plant life and food? And as I'm studying our language more and more, and through the wisdom of my grandfather, and listening to his stories, we didn't really differ what food was and what medicine was, because fiddleheads, what fiddleheads does to us, and I think Doreen would agree, is that it cleanses us. Whatever bacteria that this bad bacteria that we've processed through the winter months, fiddleheads actually cleanses our whole system and gets rid of that bad bacteria. And
another thing is maple water.
Maple water, yeah.
Water. We should drink the maple water because it puts all the nutrients that we need that we lost during the winter, yeah, and prepares us for the spring.
And I remember in the late summer and early parts of fall, my mother used to get us to go pick these, I think they were chook cherries. And then she would cook them. And she would like boil them, and then she'd pick the pits out, and then she'd feed us that. And she'd put a little bit of sugar in because they were really sour and sharp tasting. But she said, don't go too far, because it made you have diarrhea and you'd have to run to the bathroom. And she learned that from my grandfather. And the rhyme and reason is because in the summer we ate candy and we ate a lot of like sugary stuff. She said, and that would clean your system out before the winter comes. So yes, like we'd go outside and play, but by God darn it, within 30 minutes you were running to the bathroom. So she would feed us in different stages because we all couldn't go into the bathroom at the same time. She would feed, like older siblings. She would spread out the feeding process because we all couldn't rush in the bathroom at the same time. So these things also have to be brought back and reclaimed in how to cleanse our system, yeah. So it's almost 11 o'clock now. So I don't know how much longer Mark, you wanted me to keep on flapping my lips. So.
I was trying to sneak away a couple of times. I just haven't been able to. And I got lots of things on my task list, but I've been enjoying this conversation so much that I've stuck around the whole time, and I love it. And yeah, your obligation ends here at 11, and we went all the way to 11. I wasn't even expecting to go all the way this far here. This has been great conversation. If anybody has any kind of last things that they want to bring up or just present here or whatnot, here's your opportunity. Otherwise, yeah, we should probably wrap here pretty soon.
And just to let you know that I'll be probably stopping in periodically at the farm once you guys start working there and stuff, just to see. And I love to see the planting and then eventually the various stages of production there and the growth. So,
just to let you know, Ron, Cecilia is leading her take on the blanket exercise on Monday afternoon. She calls it the walking talking circle.
Yeah.
And so that's Monday afternoon. And I don't know, just to throw it out there, I know you're a busy fella, but if you wanted to make that one, it starts around 12:30.
Okay, I'm just looking at my 12:30. Oh, crap, I have I might come later, but I have a luncheon meeting with somebody, but
Sure.
I'll stop by.
Yeah, and you're always welcome. You know that, Bendo.
Yep. Yeah. So I want to thank you for listening to me. I hope you weren't too bored. So.
Did Willie win?
Willie and Ron.
And so are you down here yet, Doreen, or?
Yeah, I've been here. I got an apartment here. So
okay.
I've been here now for a week and a half.
Oh, nice. And my daughter's moving back from New York in the first part of June. So she probably has to quarantine, but she has an apartment here at York. And she has 2 boys, and I'd love to bring the boys to the farm because they've been living, well, not in a city. The city where they've been living at is probably the size of Fredericton, but they're moving back here. And she'll be working at the Resiliency Center out in Gagetown. And she's really looking forward to that. And bringing her 14-year-old and soon to be 4-year-old. So
And this is one of the reasons I'm looking forward to the language school happening on this farm. If that all works out, is farm needs more voices of kids here. They're always welcome for sure.
Yeah, we'll have to bring them there to get their hands dirty to see what it's like to work with the earth again. So,
Well, Ron, thank you very much.
okay.
Thank you, Ron.
Yeah,
Thank you so
Raymond,
much.
Siduan, and great to have you on board, Matt.
Thank you.
Good to see you. Till
Up
next
to-
time.
Right.